Okay, so Chris, let's go ahead and get started. Today we are looking at Candidate.FYI, and I noticed some branding on your website that you really have emphasized candidate experience,
Mhm.
right? It's not just a scheduling tool. I think a lot of the other products out there lead with, "Hey, it's a scheduling tool," and we know that this is a pain point for a lot of ATS customers. But also consistent with what I've seen of your product before, it seems like you guys are really focused on a delightful user experience, and that is so important because so often when we see these tools, at least from my perspective, I'm thinking, okay, this is just a glorified low token bandwidth chatbot that with a wrapper on it, right? And you guys are so far beyond that. So as we're talking about Candidate FYI today, I'd love for you to emphasize the delightful user experience that I think is a hallmark of your brand. Yeah, and then I think also the reporting functionality. That's another thing that stood out the last time we spoke. I think it was 6 months ago,
Mhm.
and the folks who were on that call were really impressed with the access to data, uh, the UI itself, right? Because a lot of times we've seen good data tools that look like they were made 20 years ago, and that's absolutely not the case with your tool. So on that note, I think I've hit on the key things important to me. Daniela, if you have anything that you would like us to emphasize or call out, please drop it in chat. This will be recorded and saved in our product deep dive archive in SAI, so folks can watch it there too. Chris, I'll hand it over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Alex. Daniela, Caitlin, it's great to meet you both, and super excited to jump in everything today. Quick background on myself. I'm one of the co-founders over here at Candidate.FYI. Kyle and I started the company several years ago at this point, and we obsess over the candidate experience, right? And when people talk about the candidate experience, there's so many different areas within it. There is scheduling, there's coordination, there is getting feedback from candidates, there's communicating with candidates. There's so many different areas that really matter throughout the interview process. And what we noticed was tools, mostly ATSs, were just not focusing on these areas. So we said, you know what, let's build something that can sit on top of it and really streamline this entire process. So a lot of exciting things we're doing. I'm going to bring you through most of the platform today. I won't bring you through like a full 45-minute session. We're going to kind of touch on the key areas, and then we'll open it up for questions at the end. But want to pass it over to Kyle so he can give you some intro on himself as well.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So I'm the other co-founder of Candidate.FYI and Chris's brother. So we started the company together several years ago, as Chris mentioned. Really just coming at it from our own frustrations and our own experiences. So I come from a technical background. A big part of my career has been building engineering teams and hiring engineers and product managers and designers. And I always worked very closely with the recruiting teams. And one thing I just noticed over and over again was just how inefficient their process was. You know, when you look at hiring in general, right? Hiring an employee is one of the most important decisions that a company makes, right? One of the most impactful decisions. And the hiring process is, you know, kind of the most important part of that entire decision, right? And if you look at how inefficient it is, it's really just mind-boggling, right? I was working, you know, closely with recruiters and coordinators, and you would have, you know, 4 or 5 different tools up just to schedule an interview with a candidate. So then when you know, kind of take a step back and look at scheduling, you know, thousands of interviews, it's just, you know, this really slows down our entire hiring process. So I said, you know, there's got to be a better way. And that's when I started chatting with Chris, and Chris was coming at it from the candidate side, and really just was, you know, going through a couple different experiences where just had an awful candidate experience. He had, you know, hundreds of emails and no idea where he stood in the process. So he, you know, said there's got to be a better way to just completely look at this entirely differently. So how can we actually make recruiting teams much more efficient by providing them, you know, the right tooling, but also empower them to provide a much better experience for their candidates as well. So that's kind of what led to Candidate.FYI forming. So it's a little bit about our story. So I always like to give that in the beginning.
Daniela called that, I think, what is the key frustration, which is so much back and forth to schedule an interview. It is really exhausting and time consuming. So you guys are really solving something that I think makes recruiting much more effective and allows recruiters to really do what they were hired for, which is make those authentic connections.
Awesome. Well, before we jump into it, any questions for us, for Kyle and I?
I don't think so. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure there'll be questions during and after. We do like to keep our sort of like demo presentations pretty interactive. So if there's anything you see during that you want to get some more information on, please jump in and we can go over it. Cool. We'll always like to start with this screen. I just like to show you some of the customers we work with today. So we primarily work with companies in mid-market to enterprise. So you'll see a bunch of familiar brands up here, companies like Zendesk and SalesLoft and Peloton and Relativity Space, Bally's. We span across iSums, Workday, Greenhouse, very closely connected with iSums. Now, Colin Day, who's the founder, is on our advisory board. So consistently working with them to improve integrations and just provide great experiences across our customer base. What I like to jump into next is really our candidate portal product. So this is the foundation of the candidate experience. Candidates get access to this as they're going through the interview journey with our customers. So our customers can fully brand it to their company with colors and logos and cover images and really anything they want to. But just pretend I'm Dwight Schrute interviewing for the Python engineer position at Candidate.FYI. I now get access to this one central place that is bringing me on my journey throughout the interview process. It is fully connected with iSums. So all these candidate-facing stages you're seeing here are all mapped back to iSum stages. So me as a candidate, I always know where I stand. I know what's upcoming. I know how many steps in the process there are. Now, these are customizable, meaning you do not have to show your iSum stages in here. You can really call these whatever you want, have as many as you want, as little as you want. And how it's working is it's being mapped back to an iSum stage. So when they hit that in iSums, then it's going to showcase here. It's moving with your typical workflow. It's not like you have to move them in a separate system or anything like that. So very customizable here and a ton of flexibility. Now, these portals are frictionless to access. So there's no creating accounts for me or signing up or logging in. It's all one-click access through Magic Link. So it's very simple to get in here. Now, every single stage is different. Right now, I'm on the hiring manager interview stage. It's going to feel personalized to me. It's going to show me my upcoming interviews and who they're with. This automatically pulls in from our scheduling tool. So as recruiting teams are scheduling interviews with candidates, it's going to automatically pull in here. It's going to show me who I'm meeting with. It's going to have bios on interviewers. I can join the interview directly from here if I want to. And then it's giving me the information I need to prepare for my upcoming interview. I can do my scheduling directly from here if I want to. So let's say the recruiting team has enabled candidates to do it from the portal. They can go directly in here and do it. Or it can be done through email templates and all that good stuff, that how scheduling is typically done. Now, as we go down further, it's all information pertaining to this stage and this job. So it's meeting the team, seeing who I could potentially be working with in the future. It is what to expect. So all sorts of interview prep material. It is interview tips. How do I perform at my best throughout this interview process? And anything else the team typically shares with candidates. Now, envision all sorts of employer branding information in here, any sort of comms that are being shared with candidates. All day long, recruiters and coordinators are going back and forth with candidates of how do I prepare, what's next, who am I meeting with, what are the technical specs, what are the product specs, all that stuff now lives in here. So all of those questions that are consistently dumping into inboxes from candidates are now living in here. So we see a pretty significant reduction between all the back and forth communication. But as I go down here, it's all different things. It's benefits, company-wide activities, and these can really be scaled out, meaning it's not like it's one portal for the entire company. These can be customized by rec, but what most of our customers do is customize them by like sales portals, marketing portals, engineering portals, things like that. So a ton of different flexibility here. A couple more things I want to touch on the portal, and then I'm going to stop for any questions, is our Pulse engine down here. So this is our modern take on candidate experience surveys. It is real-time feedback throughout the entire interview journey. So if you think of a candidate experience survey and what they've historically been, It's some survey that gets sent out from the ATS after the process is already over, asking the candidate how they felt. The issue with them, candidates do not fill them out. Completion rates are so low. We see anywhere from like 2% to 12%. And they're antiquated, they're long, they're boring. We've completely reimagined that with the Pulse engine here. So these are real time, they're at every single stage, and our customers see 52% completion rates across the board. And then everything rolls up into an analytics platform where you can see which stages are performing the worst, which are performing the best. Same with jobs, same with hiring managers, really everything. So a ton of CX data to look at. And then last thing I want to touch on is you can track all engagement within these portals. So you can see when are candidates going in, how long are they spending in here, how engaged are they in our process. We see from analytics, candidates access portals around 20 times on average throughout the interview process. So highly, highly engaged with coming in here. Some we see access over 200 times. So really just what we're doing is reimagining the entire experience. But want to stop there for a second, just see if there's any questions on the portal.
Oh, Caitlin mentioned that she really liked that Pulse survey, and it jumped out at me too. Like you said, collecting candidate experience information is so difficult. You made it super easy. It's wonderful.
Yep. And we're delivering it exactly where they are, right? If you think of like a typical survey, it gets sent to their inbox. Maybe it lands in spam, maybe it lands in promotions or social or something like that. Candidates are living in here all day long. So we're delivering the survey exactly where they are, which is why we see completion rates so high.
That's great. You mentioned Magic Link. That's where they get an email and they click the link in the email. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay, great.
Cool. So that's everything on the portal side. Candidate facing scheduling can be done directly from here. Now let's jump into the back end of iCIMS. So something different you're going to see here is this big schedule and Candidate.FYI button here. Clicking this is going to pop out a side nav. Candidate.FYI can live fully within iCIMS, meaning
Wow.
recruiters, coordinators, everyone can do all their scheduling directly from here. Now, a couple different forms of scheduling within Candidate.FYI. At the core and the foundation is something called an availability request and a self-scheduling request.
One quick question. Is this a Chrome plugin or is this actually in iCIMS?
Yep, this is a Chrome plugin.
Got it. Looks great.
So two different forms of availability self-scheduling. If you're not familiar with them, they're pretty simple. Availability request is when you are asking a candidate, hey, submit availability that works for you. So then we can take that and then we can match it up with the interviewer's calendar. And then we'll figure out times that work for everyone. Self-scheduling is when you're actually providing a calendar link. Candidate is going, they're clicking a day and a time, they're pressing select, and then invites are automatically sent out. I'm going to show you what both of those look like, but those are the two forms of scheduling. Availability comes in handy when it gets into complex type interviews, think like panels, executive type hiring, anything where there's more complexities. There's multiple interviewers, there's multiple time zones, things like that. Self-scheduling comes in handy when it's simple recruiter phone screens, when it's hiring manager interviews, anything like that. Now, we also have requests to schedule. This is pretty cool. It falls into like our queuing system. Request to schedule is when a recruiter is basically requesting a coordinator to schedule. So some of our customers, their workflows look like that. They have bigger coordination teams. Recruiters are sort of like managing the initial step, and then they're just kind of handing it over to the coordinator, which then falls into the coordinator's queue, which we'll get into in a bit, or directly schedule now. So clicking this is going to allow you to actually schedule directly in iCIMS. So it's going to pull in the interviewer's availability, all that good stuff. Now, where I should have started a bit ago, but during implementation with customers, we integrate into Outlook, we integrate into Google Calendar, we integrate into, of course, the applicant tracking system, all these different things, which allows us during scheduling to see interviewers' availability and what their calendars look like and all that good stuff. Any questions on any of that?
Danielle says, and you can report on that where it shows the stage level, the position, our location, hiring manager, even recruiter?
Yep.
Got it. And Danielle had earlier asked, with the surveys at each stage, are they different questions at each stage or the same? And Kyle said, the same overall question, but specific to that stage. A 1 to 5 smiley face rating, simple and effective. Got it. I don't remember the Chrome plugin from last time. Is this a recent innovation?
No, it's not recent.
Okay.
Kyle, any ideas why the last time?
Yeah.
No, I think we've just improved it a lot since last time, Alex, is maybe why it looks a little different.
Got it. Got it. Well, reducing the toggle tax is a big one for iCIMS customers, and a lot of TA leaders are reluctant to buy one more piece of software that somebody has to log into. So I love that it's side by side.
Especially when it gets into recruiters. Like recruiters
Yep.
do not want to leave iCIMS. They don't want to leave the ATS,
Yep.
but giving them the ability to do everything right here. Now, you might be thinking, why is there all this blank space right here? Reason being is because no scheduling requests have been open for this candidate, but at the foundation of us is something called a scheduling request. Think of it as like a ticket. So anytime you start scheduling with a candidate, it's going to open up a ticket, which is considered your request, which will then fall into a queue, where then you can track and manage every single scheduling request happening across the business. Now, think about large enterprises. They're scheduling thousands of interviews per week, right? So having something to manage all those interviews and seeing what is the progress, what's happening with them, leadership can see somebody's out of office, right? Somebody else needs to take over requests, things like that. So those all fall into here. So if MFA, he had any requests open, we would see it directly in here, and then we could click into it to see what is exactly happening. What's the progress? When is this interview? Have interviewers accepted? Have they declined? All that good stuff. Now let's get into when you actually send one of these out to candidates.
Quick question, Chris.
Yeah.
What about new iCIMS versus legacy UI? Any gotchas there? Or does it work just as well in both?
Kyle, any thoughts on that?
No, it works in both.
Great.
We have a configuration for both. Yep.
Great.
So when sending out to a candidate availability or self-scheduling, let's start with the self-scheduling link. That's going to look like this. So if anyone's familiar with like Calendly or any sort of self-scheduling tools, this flow is very similar to that, where a candidate's landing on a calendar that looks like this. They're selecting a day and time. They're pressing next, pressing submit. Once they press submit, the calendar invites are automatically sent out. Video conferencing links are automatically added. Any sort of content that recruiting teams want in the calendar invites are automatically added. All that stuff automatically happens. Now, when you get into self-scheduling, there's a lot of flexibility behind the scenes with these pages. You can make this connected to 10 different interviewers' calendars if you wanted to. Think of like more high volume type hiring. You can block off certain days. You can put limitations in, like I want them to book 3 days in advance, 4 days in advance, 5 days in advance. So a ton of power behind the scenes that are actually powering these pages. When we send out calendar invites, we send out 2 invites, one to the candidate, one to the interviewer. Both are always staying in sync, but the interviewers is going to have all information about the candidate, and the candidate's going to have all information about the schedule and the interviewers and what's upcoming. All of that is powered by tokens, right? So it's automatically generating based on who the interviewer is, who the candidate is, all that good stuff there. Any questions on any of that?
I don't think so.
Okay. Next, we get into availability. These are very powerful as well. So this is what I was talking about before, where it's more of a candidate just saying, all right, you know what? Next Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday work for me as a candidate. Anything 9 to 5 works. You know, I'm pretty flexible on those days because maybe I'm not working right now. So anything 9 to 5 works. Me as a candidate, I save these times, I review it, I submit it. Once submitted, the scheduler or the coordinator or the recruiter, whoever owns this request, is now notified. Hey, Chris Connors has submitted his availability. Now it's time to go in and start scheduling on his behalf. And then that's when we get into sort of like the bulk and the heart of Candidate.FYI is the backend platform. Now, coordination teams live in here nonstop. Recruiting operations teams live in here nonstop. This is where they set up their templates. This is where they see their analytics. This is where they're setting up any automation workflows. We have a whole like AI agent within the product, right, that can just kick off as companies are moving candidates between stages. All that setup is done back here. Now, quickly, what I want to show you is I'm on a dashboard for a job, the Python engineer job. This is a portal I was showing, and these are the scheduling pages. That's all connected to this specific rec. So high level, I'm going to see, all right, how many candidates are currently scheduling? How many have been scheduled? What's our average time to interview? What is our average time to schedule? What does our interview pipeline look like? think of that as like your schedulable stages. So understanding at each stage that we're scheduling as a company, how many candidates are waiting, how many are scheduling, how many have been scheduled, and what is the total. And now as we get deeper, we get into candidate experience data. So this is all data pulling from that portal. So we want to understand for this specific job, how many candidates have activated the portal, what is the activation rate, what is the average pulse score, how many pulses have been submitted, what is the pulse completion rate, and then we can get deeper. We can look at pulse scores by stage for this specific rec. So we want to give you that flexibility to understand everything at a granular level where you can, but at the same time, be able to understand at high level too. Now, Alex, do you have a question on this?
Not yet. I mean, you really, the graphic design here is so on point, nothing distracting, easy to follow the presentation, the logic, the way that you set things up here. That eye for usability, I think, again, is something that you're doing really, really well.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you'll probably notice we've changed the UI a little bit from the last one.
Mm-hmm.
You're one of the first things you noticed.
Mm-hmm. Very easy on the eye.
Cool. So again, dashboard for the Python engineer. So everything I'm clicking into here is connected to this specific rec. This is great for leaders, right? When recruiting operations leaders, when recruiting managers, anyone wants to go in that for a rec that their team is managing to see exactly what's happening with it. So next I get into the queue for this specific rec. So we have a pretty cool queuing system for our scheduling. You can look at it at the rec level. You can look at it at the personal level. You can look at it at the team level. For this specific queue, I'm looking at it at the rec level for the Python engineer job. I want to understand as a leader exactly every single interview that's scheduled for this rec. Why? Because my leader is coming to me and saying, hey, why isn't this job filled yet? What is the delay here? Now I can go in and actually look at the data to understand, well, you know what, we have 10 interviews scheduled next week, so we should be able to get to a decision pretty soon. This is where all that data is going to live. Now you're going to see the candidate, Dwight Schrute. We're going to see what stage he's on, what the internal title is, when his interview is, who the interviewers are, who the specific scheduler is. So everything's going to show you directly here. Everything is clickable. So you can click into anything to see more detail and more granular levels. Next, we get into candidates. So again, my leader is coming to me and saying, hey, Chris, I want to understand why candidates are not happy in this specific rec. This is where we get into every candidate who has now gone through this interview process or is currently going through it. We can see what stage they're on, when the last time they were in the portal is. So Dwight was in there 8 minutes ago, how many interviews they've done. So Dwight has done 18 interviews throughout this current process for the Python engineer position, what the average pulse score is, and then what the interview status is. But we want to click into Dwight because maybe Dwight sent an email and Dwight's not happy throughout the process. So we want to understand everything that's going on. We can see, all right, they've been in their portal around 155 times. They've spent on average each time around 21 minutes in there. They've completed 6 pulses. They have a 3.6 pulse score. The last time they were in there was 8 minutes ago. I can see every interview that's happened is upcoming or current. I can see every pulse submitted by Dwight. So again, at the granular level to really figure out everything here. And then I can see the stage history. So I want to understand how Dwight has gone through our life cycle. This is where I can see that. So a ton of data that's just really difficult to get inside the ATS today.
Yeah, I was thinking I'd love to see it. I'd love to see that feature in iSIMS, stage history. Yeah. Right.
Now, next, I want to get into some of the automation. So we have very powerful automation within our product. Everything I've kind of shown you up to now has been more of the controllables, where it's like, all right, I'm clicking around as a recruiter or the coordinator, but let's say you want full automation within the product. A lot of our companies utilize our automation. Now, again, we're on the Python engineer job here. It's bringing in all of the stages based on the iSIMS integration. Now, I want to click into the prelim phone screen, and I, as the coordinator, recruiter, or manager, want to set up a ton of automation. This is where I do that here. So what I'm setting up is when a candidate goes into the preliminary phone screen stage, the scheduling template I wanted to pull in is Meet with Chris. This template is connected to my calendar. Everything's already set up for it. It's a Zoom video conferencing link. Now I want full automation. When they hit this stage, I want it to assign to the scheduler. The scheduler is going to be Chris Connors. The scheduling method is self-booking. I want it to auto send on stage entry. So all that happens here is the recruiting team moves the candidate to that stage, and then everything kicks off. So it's going to auto send to the candidate that email template with the scheduling link. So there's no clicking around to actually manually send them out. We can decide what that email template is, and then FYI enabled. So FYI is our AI agent that can do a lot of this work behind the scenes for you. So you can either enable it or not. If not, all the communications is going to come from whoever that scheduler is, Chris Connors. If so, then the communication comes from FYI with Chris Connors CC the entire time. So a ton of power there, but I want to stop there because our automation can get pretty in-depth and see if we can profit.
Well, my first question is, who is doing this? Are you telling recruiters to set this stuff up, or are you having the sysadmin set this up for them?
This is sysadmin stuff. Like
Okay.
this would be like recruiting operations teams, sysadmin, stuff like that.
Okay. And I don't understand where you say scheduler is Chris Connors. What does that mean? Like there's a human in the loop here?
So great question. So the scheduler can be like, to give it a good example, let's say there's a coordination team, a recruiting coordination team of like 10 individuals.
Mhm.
So all of them are schedulers within the company. Think of them as like coordinators. So what we're saying is, all right, when a candidate hits this stage, who do we want the scheduler to be? We want it to be Chris Connors, meaning that then this request is going to fall into Chris's queue.
But aren't candidates self-scheduling? I think I'm missing something.
They're self-scheduling, but it's still got to be tracked. So no matter what, everything falls into a queue, right? Because you want to see the status of it.
Got it. And the FYI enable, tell us more about the FYI agent. What does it do?
Yep. So if FYI is enabled, think about this stage transition, right? Like a recruiter just moved this candidate to the preliminary phone screen stage. Now all this stuff kicks off, but it's doing it with FYI. So FYI opens up the request. It's going to communicate to the candidate based on whatever email template you decide. It's going to keep Chris CC'd the entire time. And then it can do things like understand intent, right? So if the candidate responds with any sort of questions or saying, I'm no longer interested, it can understand that intent.
Okay.
It's also going to set up a cadence for itself. So what happens a lot is coordinators or recruiters reach out to candidates to schedule time. Candidates miss it, right? What do you have to do? You have to then follow back up with the candidate. The FYI will actually follow up with that candidate based on its cadence that it's set for itself. And then you can decide like tone and all that stuff.
Is it answering questions about the company and the role and stuff like that as well, or just related to the interview process?
Kyle, do you want to kind of talk through the agent a little bit?
Sure. So this is the agent's basically in the background handling a lot of the busy work that normally takes a lot of time for recruiters or coordinators. So we look at this as things like, hey, anytime there's a delay, like maybe the candidate is taking some time to go ahead and self-schedule or to enter their availability. Normally that's on the human's plate. They have to constantly follow up with the candidate.
Mm-hmm.
Now our agent just completely goes in and takes over that entire responsibility, continues to nudge and follow up with candidates. It will detect responses from candidates. So if a candidate says, hey, I'm no longer interested in the position, I accepted an offer somewhere else, it will actually automatically detect that and close out the request.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so normally that's something a recruiter or coordinator has to say, okay, respond. Now it has to go over to ATS. It has to mark the candidate as rejected for a certain reason. Now that just happens automatically by the agent. So it's those sort of operational activities. It's just completely taking over. Always with that scheduler in the loop, which is really important.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just reaching out in isolation. That's why it's important to have that scheduler there, so we know who to, always kind of keep in that loop during these conversations.
I see. I'm glad I asked, because that to me is really a huge value. This product. There's so much wasted work that happens in that gray zone.
Yep.
Really like that.
Cool. So that's the automation, and you can build it out on a rec level, or you can just build it out like company wide. So then it gets more templatized. Next, I want to get into the portal, right? Not going to spend a ton of time here, but this is where you can build out your portal for this specific rec. You can make any last minute changes if you want to. You can even make any changes like mid-process. Everything's going to auto-update in real time for any candidates that have access to the portal. So this is where all that lives. Now, what I want to get into next is more of the scheduling type stuff. So when I was talking before, Alex, of like the queues, this is my personal queue right now. So let's pretend I'm a recruiting coordinator. This is every scheduling request I am currently managing across the business. So I can see the candidate, the stage that they're on, and the job they're interviewing for. I can see ownership and status, meaning, all right, who owns this request and what's needed? Is there anything I need to do? Is there something the candidate needs to do? Is there something the interviewer needs to do? And all this auto updates based on what's happening with each request. Next is progress in interviews. So this is pretty cool. It's going to show you where is this interview at being fully booked, meaning invites have been sent out, everyone's confirmed. There's nothing more I need to do as a coordinator. This is pretty cool here. Some of these you'll see multiple circular indicators, some you'll see none. Each one represents a specific interview within the process. Because think some like panels have multiple interviews happening. And then some you'll see is orange and some is green. Anything in orange means, hey, it requires my attention as a coordinator. And anything in green means that there's nothing I need to do. So we're trying to direct your attention to ones that only require action. And of course, you can drill down by only ones that need action as well. Next is all active. So this is a company-wide queue. This is pretty cool as well. So think of it as like a management team or maybe a specific recruiting coordinators out of office. You can just go through here. You can filter by whoever you want to see what they own across the business. And then that's where you can go in and take over ownership. So let's say somebody's out sick for a few days. You can go in, see everything they're managing, and then take it over so nothing gets delayed or pushed out. So the queue is very powerful, right? It's basically a team's way to really track every scheduling request happening across the business. Next, I want to jump into interviewers. So you can really build out some pretty powerful interviewing preferences. Now I'm going to click in a specific interviewer here. You can put any sort of basic information on them that is living in the portal, but then you can get into interviewing preferences. We have some pretty cool stuff, right? You can set up like buffer times for before events and after events. You can put in max interviews per day and per week. So we have all sorts of load balancing in the product. So when you're scheduling, it's not going to overschedule someone by 10 interviews, right? Because then they're going to get burnt out. You can do things like keyword detection. So we have something called whitelisted calendar event names. This is pretty cool. Interviewers can put blocks on their calendar, call it like block for interviewing, and then that can be plugged into our system. We'll read that as actually availability, which is pretty cool. That gets pretty powerful when you get into like executive level hiring because executives never have time open on their calendar. So an EA can just put a block on there. You can plug that here, and then we'll surface that as actual available. Next is booking links. So I showed you availability and self-scheduling, but we also have other sorts of booking links. So every interviewer or anyone at the company can have their own scheduling page, which is not connected to iSums, right? It's just your simple scheduling page that can be shared really anywhere. We also have sourcing links. Those can be shared over LinkedIn. Candidate goes to select day and time, they upload resume, and then we can actually auto add them on the back end into iSums. So all that manual data entry doesn't happen. So a ton of power there. We also have a whole like pooling feature where you can really pull interviewers together. And then once you're setting up interviews, instead of saying, I want Chris or Steven or Kyle, you just say, all right, I want someone from the take-home tag or the AI tag or the Python tag. And then the technology will do the work behind the scenes. Now, last thing I want to touch on is the reporting. So a ton of reporting within Candidate.FYI. You have all sorts of engagement reporting where you can see, all right, how engaged are candidates within our process? You have all sorts of sentiment reporting to figure out at a company level, how many pulses have been submitted? What is our average pulse score? What is our completion rate? What are our lowest rated jobs, our highest rated? Same with stages. You can see every single pulse coming in, and then you can really drill down by recruiter, by job, kind of search it however you want. All this can be clicked into as well. So if you want to understand more information, then we have all sorts of scheduling analytics. So understanding how many interviews are happening per week, how many interviews have been completed, who is the most active interviewer within our company. You can look at that over interviews, over rounds, jobs, departments. You can play around with the timeframes up here as much as you want to. All these analytics are in real time. So as it's happening, it's all pulling in here. We have all sorts of coordination metrics to figure out what is our average time to first interview, how many total interviews have been scheduled. Again, you can look at this at a specific scheduler level if you want to. And then again, you can click into anything to see the raw data to figure out exactly what's happening. Next, we get into reschedule data, which is pretty powerful. You can look at reschedules across the entire business to figure out what is our reschedule rate across specific interviews, or maybe we want to look at it by jobs. We're seeing the Python job has had 108 reschedules. We want to look at that departmentally, or any sort of change reasons, right? So we have a pretty powerful decline reasons that candidates can put within that they can put after declining or rescheduling an interview. Same with interviewers. And again, you can click into these to see exactly what's happening with them. Next, we get into declines. You can look at decline rates across specific interviewers. So I'm sure everyone on this call knows somebody internally that is always declining interviews or rescheduling. This is where you can actually look at the data to say, all right, Kyle has declined 24% of his interviews, and Max has declined 50%. Maybe that lets us know as a company we should maybe move around our interviewers. And again, you can click in to see everything there. A few more things down here I won't spend too much time on. You can drill down into any piece of data you want within our platform. And then last thing I want to touch on is our AI query assistant. This is pretty cool. We think it's a future of reporting. We think this is exactly where reporting is going. So you can really ask anything in natural language. We'll click one of these examples right here. Anything in natural language, and then our AI is going to understand the question, interpret it, look through the data, think through it, and then it's going to deliver you summaries, charts, graphs, to really show you exactly what's happening. I can then save this report or this query as a new report. So we think it's a future, right, where you can just generate reports through natural language and then save it for future use.
Are there visuals as well?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Charts and...
Yep. Yeah.
Here we go. Wow. That is amazing.
A lot of power and a lot of functionality.
Yeah, no, and as somebody who's built a lot of charts, I have some idea of what went into that. The ease of use, the clarity. So a couple of questions. Zooming out for a second, is there a way for customers? So we have some customers that are totally into AI. We have some who are completely against it. Is there a global AI kill switch that lets people use your product without any sort of AI?
Yep. So we see the same thing. We have some customers who really want it. Others where InfoSec teams come in, they're like no AI. So there is.
Okay, great. And what about the? I learned a new term the other day, glass box, the opposite of black box. What about the ability to see under the hood and figure out how these visuals were created, or are we just accepting that whatever the delta is acceptable and what you're giving us is perfectly useful and not impacting anybody adversely? Does that question make sense?
Alex, the visuals as far as those the charts that Chris was showing?
I'm talking about like, okay, these charts are beautiful, and how do they get there? And can we see the data underneath them? Can we audit it? I'm talking both about the ability to audit the data, right? Because I agree with you. Like at some point, building this stuff is just going to go away and the vendors are going to do it for you. And we're going to be very happy and grateful for getting back that time, right? But especially larger orgs and want the ability to audit that data to make sure that it is aligned with what they were expecting to see. And then also orgs are going to want to be able to know that there's nothing going on with the AI functionality that feeds into that data that could adversely impact the candidates. So two questions really.
Yep. All the data on Candidate.FYI is completely auditable through different logs as far as like what AI is doing when it's operating in the case of the agent. In the case of some of the metrics that Chris was showing, it's an interesting problem, right? Because AI in general is non-deterministic, right? It kind of has a mind of its own. Versus data, you want hardcore, or cold data, right? You want the facts of this is literally what happened. So we've kind of taken an approach of best of both worlds, where we have predefined sets of data or metrics that are calculated, in code. But for the question for what data do you want, that gets handled by AI and interpreted back to our predefined metrics. That gives you the answer to that question. So in other words, it's not like AI is going into a database and writing some SQL queries itself, trying to figure out what you're asking for. It's bringing it back to predefined metrics that are already built and are built to deliver the answers to the questions ahead of time.
And are those platform-wide, or are they customized to the individual customer?
We have platform-wide
Okay.
metrics, and we
Okay.
continue to add new ones all the time.
Got it. Have you gotten any pushback from decision makers and InfoSec teams, and how have you responded to that?
We have different customers who are on different levels of comfort with when they're ready to actually adopt AI.
Yeah.
The ones who are comfortable and ready to adopt it, they're comfortable for as long as we have certain guardrails in place, right? So redacting PII anytime it's going to an LLM, right, is an important part, right? They don't want to actually be sending sensitive data over to an LLM, making sure, again, we have audit logs in place. So those are sorts of table stakes features in order to adopt AI for an organization. For ones that just aren't quite ready, we do have the ability to kind of ease them into it, where they can use kind of just your native kind of SaaS until they're ready to kind of adopt the different AI features and agents inside of the platform.
Got it. What about quantifying the ROI of using your tool? How do you present that to customers and prospects?
Yeah, it's a great question. We usually go through kind of a project with our customers or prospects to really understand how they're doing things today, to understand how we can improve, upon their processes, right? So, teams who, have a lot of, headcount, right? Maybe it's making that headcount more efficient so they don't have to hire more headcount to help them, produce the same or more results, right, that they're looking for. Which could be very different for teams who are already lean and efficient, right? So it really kind of just depends on that customer and their process.
And
Got it. Go ahead, Chris.
Alex, I'm going to share in the chat. So we actually just released something pretty cool where you can companies, it's a whole questionnaire where companies can understand basically what level of coordination they're at today. So it's level 1 through 5, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. And that's what Kyle was getting to, where it's really different per customer, because some are at level 1 and they're a 1,000+ person company, and everything is manual, right? So the ROI on that is significantly higher than a level 5 where there's a lot of automation, but they just want to bring in a little bit more of it. So I'll share that. It's pretty cool. It's interactive where you can kind of go through it and
maturity assessment. I love that, because what I'm speaking to here is, I'm sure you've encountered this, where you have a TA leader who really wants to do this because they understand the impact of having inefficient processes. And then they take it to an executive, and the executive is like, well, sounds nice. I would like people to, not be as harried, right? But is this actually going to save us money at the end of the day?
Yeah.
So what do you focus on when you're having that conversation? Are you talking about quality of hire? You're talking about reducing turnover rates? I'm sure it's custom for each customer, but what do you tend to focus on?
So it's all the above, right? And a lot of it is what's important to the customer, because we're solving a few different areas. A few more recent ones that I can kind of talk through is talking about not having to hire more team members to schedule interviews, right? Because if you're bringing in technology that can help the current team do a lot of this work, then you don't have to bring on 3 to 5 more coordinators this year, right? So then looking at that level of reduced headcount to not have to hire those additional people.
Got it. Great. Thank you. Let's see. Daniela, do you have any other questions? Caitlin, Ty, Stephanie, I noticed you joined us a little bit late. Welcome. The recording will be in SAI. Caitlin, what are you thinking?
I'm good.
Yeah.
It's always cool to see new stuff, and I
Yeah.
really like the changes you guys have made since last time.
Hey, hello everybody. New here literally as of today. I just have a quick question on this tool. Is there any future roadmap plans for and I was looking on your site, I don't think there's the functionality for meeting notes and interview notes. And so is that somewhere on the roadmap that y'all are considering?
I'll just say, just give us a couple weeks, and
Oh, yeah.
we have some exciting stuff coming up.
Okay, great. Yeah, we're at a cusp of some decision making around interview management, and I just literally happened to stumble here, so glad I did.
Are you all going through like an evaluation or?
No, we were an iCIMS customer, and we have interview management. And like I told the team, if you'd asked me 2 years ago, as far as functionality that we need to enable and pursue, we need to do something around interview management. It's been in our backlog. Recently, we adopted LEAI for note taking specifically, and that was out of my purview. So found out about it from a recruiter that's what we were doing. And I'm the solutions architect for our talent team. And anyway, found out about that when I was like, okay, well, hold the phone, because looks like they do some interview scheduling as well. And so, like I said, I'm at a cusp of like directionally where do we go. Listening to you guys today, just maybe adds another third potential option. Our recruiters have not adopted LEAI. The rollout was like, here's a tool, go do it. And then I found out about it. So
Would you say?
Why aren't they using it? Well, I'd love to know. What is it?
Is it being sunset, or is it just kind of sitting on the shelf?
It's sitting. We've got some recruiters that have figured out things by tinkering themselves, but it was just not rolled out.
Yeah.
It was purchased, thrown in their laps, and
I mean, what sort of change management advice do you give your customers? Yeah.
Come to your solutions architect first.
Yeah.
Step one, so that we can look at what we're doing and why we're doing it and who's going to benefit. So
Yeah.
Alex, that's a great question. And initial response is like, of course, it depends on the customer and what current state looks like. But in this industry around coordination, scheduling, these things, like you have to handhold with customers in the beginning, or else that happens, right? Like these are big implementations, right? They're company-wide rollouts. So it's a lot of like taking these steps and working with coordination team, then recruiting team, then specific interviewers, and doing sort of rollouts so you get the highest adoption possible. But it's a lot of hand-holding, so I'd say like anyone here ever looking at a vendor in this space, understand what support looks like, understand what enablement looks like, because all that stuff is so important.
Well, and that's part of the reason why we tend to bring in founder-led companies to these product deep dives, because we know that the passion is there, the support is there, and that the investment can look very different from working with companies where it's not the case.
Yeah.
I have a question. What are you seeing? So I don't know of a vendor that does this. This is kind of left field, but it's relevant. Fiverr, the marketplace for freelancers, has a handoff process where there is an agent, and you're chatting to the agent. And if that agent if the person behind that agent is available, it will ping them and connect them with you directly and give a summary of the conversation that you've had so far. And I keep thinking, right, if there was some way to qualify somebody during the initial part of the intake to where it made sense to connect them with a recruiter immediately, is there a tool that does that? And I've heard that Paradox might do something like that, but I haven't seen that demonstrated yet. Do you know of something like that, or is that potentially a direction that you guys have thought about?
So Alex, the question is, you've seen a tool where a candidate is reaching out and engaging with, so let's say, a chatbot that is powered by AI, and it does some sort of qualification. And if it meets a certain threshold, then it escalates and brings it, to a person.
Yeah. It was so cool. It really made an impression on me.
Yeah.
I think recruiting needs this.
Yeah.
Like application review type thing, almost.
Yeah. We have some thoughts on kind of the initial stages of the review process. I think it may be challenging in this particular scenario where it's constant escalations to recruiters, because I think what you'll find is candidates will start or already using AI to get past kind of the filler questions.
Yeah.
So you'll start flooding the recruiters with escalations.
Yeah.
So I just, I think it's going to be pretty tough for recruiters to actually manage that.
Yeah, I don't want to spam recruiters. I'm imagining the very strict criteria that
if you look at it like that model for like support, right? Because we have chatbots and escalations to support. The goal of the person reaching out is to get their problem resolved, right? It's to actually, get that support question answered or get whatever issue they're having resolved. That could be solved by, AI, right? When you have the scenario of reaching out to a recruiter, their job is to just get past that initial kind of filler questions to get in touch with the recruiter. So they're going to do whatever they can to get past that, to get in touch with the recruiter, even if they're potentially not the right fit. So I think it's a tough model for this industry.
Yeah, got it. And one final question. Stephanie, do you have any other questions you'd like to ask before we break?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Great. My final question is, who else do you think we should talk to? Who else is doing something really compelling in the space, smaller founder-led company with great tech and a great user experience?
That's a good question. Can I give it some thought?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Great.
There's so many that are doing so many good, as you know, with all the recruiting tech out there.
Yeah, of course. All right. Well, thank you so much, Chris and Kyle. Thank you, Stephanie, Daniela, for joining us today. We will post the recording of this session in SAI, and we will talk to you guys soon. Thank you so much.
Of course. Bye, everyone.